Hello everybody. We're going to be making a little bench today. Probably going to be primarily using hand tools, traditional hand tools. And I got some cypress the other day because this bench is going to be mainly outside. And so cypress will hold up really good outside in the weather, whether painted or not. So it's going to be a very simple little bench. Don't have any drawings or anything. That's it right there. I got the basic measurements, and the rest of it's kind of going to be, we'll do it by eye and see how it turns out. There hopefully will be some dovetail bracing involved, and maybe some sliding dovetails to attach the legs to the top. So we'll see what we get. Alrighty, so we got our piece, got all the labels off of it. The person that sells it, they like putting labels on all over everything. So it's a matter of getting those labels off. And right now we'll start to measure out. These are some fairly simple measurements. I want the bench to be overall 20 inches long, and the legs will be approximately 24 inches high. So out of this piece we'll just barely get those 3 boards out of it. So the legs, the top will be the same width. So we'll cut this off, we'll come underneath as a leg, and we'll say we'll cut this end off and bring it up as the next leg. And our sliding dovetails will go into the piece for the top. Okay? So what we need, and these are rough measurements, these are not final cuts per se. So all these cuts get cleaned up eventually. So first off we'll need 24, and yes, I'm measuring right off the end of the board because this is an outside bench. Even if there are little splits or anything like that, we don't necessarily have to worry about it because, you know, it's just going to be a rough bench. And some of this will get cut out for to shape legs in the end. I'll either put a boot jack in or cut a half circle like in a shaker bench. So our first mark was at 24, and I think what I'm going to do is measure off from the other end 24, and those 2 ends will be our legs. Now give us just a little less than 21 inches for top. Okay, on to the next step. We'll get the saws and stuff and get ready to cut this, cross cut it. So, before we start cross cutting, just a small note about saws. This is an old saw that my dad had. I restored it, resharpened it as best as I could, and then reset the teeth. But we'll be cross cutting this, and to help lube the blade up, traditionally it was often used to use a wax candle. In this case I have a paraffin wax, and all you do is you take, these get stored with a guard over it. I have a guard that slips over to, you know, keep from messing up my work that I did in sharpening. You don't want it to hit or bang up against something else, so a nice little guard goes over it. and helps protect teeth. But to lube the blade, because you'll be cross-cutting, should help to prevent the saw from binding. We use the candle, and we'll just take, doesn't need a lot, right down here where the saw will be cutting. Do the same thing for the other side. And then occasionally you tune it up. And then have at it. Okay, and then something else we also need in cross-cutting or ripping are saw benches. And these are just literally benches. These were made out of, I think, 2x10 or 2x12, and they're just made like a regular old bench. They got legs, mortise, and tenon through them. Nothing fancy. I did cut a bird's mouth right here at the end, so that you could do some smaller work if you wanted to, but it isn't really necessary. So 2 benches at the right height, somewhere about the knee, and allows me to then place the board right there and bring your benches up. Grab the crosscut saw. Hopefully this saw cup doesn't go errant, because I have a tendency to saw like a drunkard sometimes. So what we'll do, I'm going to go ahead and probably saw on the leg side of the line that I cut. And I guess in this case it doesn't matter what side of the line you cut on. If I cut on the other side, I might have just a wee bit less for the top. Cut on the leg side, which there's plenty of leg there, then all the cleaning up will be on that side, hopefully. So, however, so what we do, we put our thumb right down here, almost right on the line, right there. Bring our saw up, set it on the side of the line that we want it on. We take our thumb and brace it right up against the side of the saw, and the first cut we bring back on it, like that. Now we line everything else up, the saw with the line, make sure it isn't twisted this way or that, and then we start our push stroke. And just keep doing that, eyeing your line. Slow down here at the end of your cut so you don't blow out the edge. There you go. One leg down. You'll have to forgive me, because that saw was bowing pretty good, but I probably still have to do a little work on the teeth. And then in the old saw plate there were some rust pits, so that could cause a little friction there too, which is why we take and go ahead and we wax the plate up on any saw that we do. So, all right, let me flip this board around and we'll cut the other side. Alright, we'll go ahead and take our wax again. I don't know if you noticed, right where the sawing action is where the wax was gone, was just mainly right through here. So if you want to save you a little time or even a little wax, you don't even have to wax the very tips. Just make sure you get some right in there where most of that friction's going to be at. Alright, try it again. Leg number 2. Okay. Before we start usually, and then as we progress along, we usually try to analyze, the lumber as we go along. Every time you work the board sometimes will change character, and it'll either warp a little bit more as it gains more moisture as you're planing, or as you're sawing even. It releases stresses in the wood and sometimes can start showing up in certain places. Now I knew this was already here from the beginning, and we will have to work with this, especially with the sliding dovetails. I'm not sure how well this will work. This might prove to be a pain in the butt in the end, but we'll see. But what we got is the board overall has cupped a bit. I don't know if you can see that right through there. So as thin as the board is, I believe it's just about at 3/4 inch. Probably need all the meat that we're going to need on there. But what I might try to do is take scrub plane and knock off these high spots a little bit on this side and bring it down to flat. I don't mind if it has a crown in it, a little bit in the top, because it is going to be a bench for outside. And as what will happen, hopefully, is as it rains on this, the water will have a tendency to want to run off on both sides. But that's the top. But we also have the same problem in our legs too, because it's still part of the same board. And this would be, and you can see how much that's cupped and curved too. That'll have to be the other part of the sliding dovetail. So there could be a couple things we might be able to do, is clamp some battens on both sides, cut it straight, and then slide it in. Might even be able to do that a little bit for the top some. We'll just have to see as we go along. This is kind of part of the woodworking thing. Nobody's ever been inside this tree before. Nobody has ever seen what the inside is like, what the grain is like. And so you're kind of taking in a little data as you go along, and then trying to make the best decision as possible as you go, and hope for a good outcome. So we shall proceed along. I think we will proceed along with the scrub and jack plane and try to flatten the bottom first. Hello. Now to address a little something before we use our planes is wood grain in this case. You could see here on the big planer that there was some tear out in the wood grain. Well, the grain, as you can see here, runs in a nice straight line down through here, but we're also running right up to the close to the center or the heart of the tree, which is probably about in here somewhere. The rings run this way as they go out. When we plane, we have to keep these different veins, so to speak, in consideration. You can't please them all the time. This ain't bad here. Where we get into close to a knot, or where a branch come off of the main trunk, then the grain will start to swirl in different directions around that. And so no matter sometimes however you approach it, you'll end up with tear out on one side or the other. And I don't know, I use hand tools a good bit, and a lot of people, and maybe for good reason in some cases, depending on how nice the furniture is or the piece, is they fuss over the grain in that area, and that's fine. And then in other times, you know, it is just a little tear out. You get it with the machines, and you also get it with hand tools. So sometimes it isn't a big deal to fuss over. But in consideration of this project, this bench is going to be outdoors. I'm not going to fuss a whole lot about tear out. Obviously, it's already in the board. And again, it being outside, I'm not going to fuss too much over that. But in this piece here, even though the grain don't look too bad going down through there, when you look at it from the edge, right here is one vein of grain that runs. You see it rises there, dives down this way, and completely comes up here, which is probably why we get some tear out through here, because the grain is all of a sudden poking through the edge of the board. And then it dives back down this side. And again, probably more tear out, depending on what direction that planer was running. So these are all things to keep in consideration. And we'll try to keep that in consideration with as we plane, or try to. Okay, before we get started on trying to flatten the bottom a little bit, we're going to get into a couple of the hand planes to do that with. Both of these planes are considered jack planes. They're both number 5 sized in the Stanley numbers. This one is an old Stanley. Let's see, I think the patent on it is April 19th of 10, so that'd be 1910. This one here is actually a nice plane, and this one here is a Sargent. And everything's beautiful on it, it's very clean. But this one here, I turned into a scrub plane. Now, a scrub plane will have a cambered or curved iron, so that what protrudes down is just a small amount of the iron. In some ways acts like a gouge, or like the tip of my hand here, in that the iron is curved, and so only a small amount gouges up as it goes along. So we've knocked the top off a little bit on this. Again, it hasn't gotten into the bottom of the curve, but it's started to already knock off the high spots. And that'll do it a little quicker than, you know, some cases, than running up and down along the grain. But you might need a little bit more of that. Try to help flatten that out some. So. I have shimmed up the backside because of the curve, sort of kind of bring that up on the edge so it ain't rocking so bad. Something else too I should note, even though I didn't do it, was out here on this outer edge. When you come through with the plane, it might have a tendency to break that edge off. Well, you can ease that over This is using a regular iron rather than the cambered one. You go down along through there and break that edge a little bit. That way I don't break it out so bad, hopefully. There's a nice little knot right there. So that's digging into that pretty good. What we'll do is turn this around end for end. Make sure our bench dogs are still up. Those are our homemade bench dogs. I think they're made out of poplar dowel rod, split to give a little friction there so they don't fall through the hole. It allows us to come at that knot differently. So okay. Well, no, if you can see in the raking light or not, this here's our scrub plane marks, and like I said, it's gouging out it's gouging out the material. Now this right here isn't touched because that's the hollow or the bottom of the material of the board that's bowed. So you're just taking off the top, and we might let it go at that a little bit. I'll probably run the jack plane over, kind of smooth that up just a tad bit. So let's see. Like I said, this is the Sargent number 5. This has a regular iron in it. This is set up as, I guess, would be normal. Let's see here. And the iron is flat across on that. It's not curved like that. And so that takes off evenly and flat. It doesn't gouge it out like a gouge or a chisel would. So this is one of the processes in prepping the board to get it closer to being flat. So I don't want a plane down here in the bottom. Not that it will plane down in there, but I want to hit these, at least these tops, to start flattening it out just a tad bit. Dress it up just some. It doesn't have to be perfect again. This is an outdoor bench. Give myself a little bit more. See there, that starts knocking out the scrap plane marks. Not sure you can tell or not. I brought it down a tad bit more. Yeah. I can hit some of them outer edges a little bit, bring it down some more. I want to leave enough meat right here though for thickness. Okay, as you've probably seen, I've left it, the top cambered a little bit. Again, this is going to be outside, and so my idea is that in leaving it bowed like that, water will hopefully help run off. And it doesn't have to be super dead flat. It's not a dining room table or anything. It's just a stool that's going to be sitting outside. I believe I will edge join a couple of these, this side and this side. That way I can mark the dovetails. I did get these a lot flatter, much flatter. In fact, because this is where we will be marking out our slot for the dovetail, sliding dovetail, God willing. Now the legs, I did a little experimentation. I have a homemade Moxon's vise, and then putting this in there and clamping it down, this board flattens out. So what I think we're going to try to do, so as not to lose so much in this, and trying to flatten it now, because well, let's see, we're looking at, they've milled these right at 3/4 inch. So by taking down any bow in the wood or cupping, you would end up probably with 5/8 or so, and that ain't a whole lot to work with. I wish I had full inch stuff to work with and be able to flatten this out, but it is what it is. This is cypress. It's hard to get around here. I'm not going to say hard to get, but it's expensive when we do get it. So got to take what we can get. So, all right. I'll edge join these, and that way I'll be able to see my, hopefully my dovetail marks and stuff, and we'll go from there. Got 5/8 right on the button.
Looks like a croissant.
Not a half bad shaving.
Looks like a croissant, and now I'm hungry.
There's no. All right, so I think we're good enough to start marking and laying out the sliding dovetails. About 3 years ago, I took a dovetailing class up at the Artisans Guild at Colonial Homestead. And so we had 3 dovetails that we went over. One of them was through dovetails. The other one was half blind dovetails for drawers. And the other one was a sliding tapered dovetail, which I did okay on. But this is it. This is the sample. Of course, it's a tapered keyway basically. And as it slides in and closer to where it seats in, it tightens right up. Now that's nifty, but there's also a lot of room for error in that right there. So what I'm going to try to do is leave out the tapered part and just do a sliding dovetail all the way in. And glue just the front portion, and then that way the back portion can slide along the legs as it expands and contracts. But this part right here is what we're going to need. Right here, this is the socket, and then this layout right here is the tails. So I think what I'm going to try to do, because there's going to be a lot of marking with marking gauge, and we'll generally get this baseline, is I'll go ahead and use this and get the depth off of there. Now I'll have to kind of split the difference just a little bit, because my thickness here on my tabletop is not quite as thick as the board, sample board was. So I hopefully will be setting this at somewhere around 3/8 or just a hair under, just to split my difference, because it's almost 5/8 inch thick. I've already flattened this section earlier. This is my tabletop, or the underside of my tabletop. I need to pick an edge that's good. This has got a little breakout right here from, I'm guessing, the banding. This will go to the back. Now my hope is to, when this is finished, to put a bevel on this so that it hopefully will eliminate most of that splinter. So this is the front portion. And the reason we did the cleaning up was so that we could see our layout marks. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the vise to hold it. This side will have to be the reference edge. Definitely not the top portion, but the underside. Let's see. One, I need to mark about how far they're going to be in, roughly. We'll say, let's try 2 inches in from the end. Now this will be the depth of the socket. Now we keep that depth. We mark it on this side, but we also need to flip it over and mark it on the other side too. That gives us a reference from this side to that side. Let me do a little thing here. Oh, did it. All I'm doing here is setting my square to mark the 2-inch mark. I know it seems ridiculous, I shouldn't be able to use this 2-inch mark too, but I was able to set the pencil right back on that mark, so that should be the exact same mark on the other side. Yeah. That was off just a tad. And that's why we do that. Get rid of our stray marks, because as Murphy's Law would dictate, something can go wrong at will, and you'll find that one mark that you didn't want. Okay, so we've got a baseline marked. We've got the very far edge of the miter that we want to do. Now what we'll do is we'll lay this on that mark, and get the width of our board. Should probably. Okay, I have one of the few things that I've bought from Veritas Tools are these dovetail markers. And I bought this kind because once upon a time I was going to take a furniture making class at the Rio Grande University in southern Ohio. And these markers were suggested by them to be purchased for the class. And so, I did. I went ahead and I bought the set. They weren't a whole lot. And there's 3 different types of dovetail angles in it. And the setup is pretty simple. All it is extruded aluminum angle. Each dovetail angle is a different color. So this one here, and I had to mark it on here because they didn't, was dovetail slope ratio of 1:8. And that's considered, I guess, for hardwoods generally. This is a 1:6, and then this one here in general is a 14-degree marking gauge. And so we'll pick one of these, and then we'll use it to get a slope on our sliding dovetail. So, and probably any one of these will work, really, to be quite honest about it. I know there's a lot of arguments that ends up on Facebook groups and chats and things like that as to softwood, hardwood, and etc. And really, the old timers cut a lot of them by hand, and they didn't even have a marker. And that slope can range anywhere from 1:6, 1:8, or God knows what the guy was going through that day. So we'll just pick one and we'll go for it. Now in marking this, I will use a marking knife because probably mostly from here on out it is better to slice and scribe the grain as you go. It'll make a lot nicer, cleaner cuts as you go from here on out. The pencil, no matter what pencil you use, whether it's the old yellow pencil or a mechanical pencil, does fine lines. But from here on, there's a lot of cross grain work. And so a marking knife is a lot better to be able to sever the fibers across the grain to make your saw cuts and things, so that it just makes for a more pleasing cut. So from here on out, I think we're going to start using the marking knife. Bring my line down just a little bit more. There you go. Gravity does that.
Here it goes.
Hard on tools. Okay. I don't know if we can see this or not. It'd be extremely hard. So this is laying out the overall groove or the width of the board down here at the base. The dovetail part of this that locks it in, that I just marked with the knife, is just off of that 90-degree line, and it's the only knife line on there. Now, since I did that on both sides, I will take these marks that are right here at the top. This is one great thing about knife marks, is that once you're sure the mark goes there, they will always be there, and you can drop your line right into it. So now I'll deepen that and bring it right over the edge. Now I can see those knife marks right here, here, there, and there. Now it'll be a matter of me taking a straight edge or the edge of a square and lining those two up and making a series of knife cuts off of that. And that scribe line severs the fibers across there, so then I could take my handsaw and start cutting into that. Once you do about 2 passes with the knife against this, we're doing very light passes because if you push slightly against that, you'll knock it off of your marks on either end. Once you take that initial cut and very light pass with a sharp marking knife, then you can do a second one a little harder, and then the third one can be free-handed, can fall right in that groove, and you can make several passes in there to make it deeper and deeper and deeper, and that way it's scribed in there for good. Okay, now we do that for the other side. We score those lines across there, and then we'll work on sawing down along that. In this case, I might make something of a jig block at that appropriate angle to be able to work the saw at, because it is a long ways across there with a crosscut back saw. So. Okay, we will be shooting with a hand plane the ends of the legs. Now I on purpose picked the factory ends to do that too, because, I mean, why not? I checked them over and they were pretty darn square and flat across. So I mean, you'd be stupid to not use that edge, and that edge is what we will use to do our dovetail. It is mostly square width down the sides of the legs, but we're not going to quite worry about that right now. After the legs get put in place, and then we will use a plane to trim up edges and things so that they look better. So that's why, excuse me, I'm not worrying about it right now. However, the very ends of the leg, where we will do the dovetail, is pretty good. But we'll go ahead and we'll shoot it anyway to make it nice, crisp, and as clean as we possibly can. Excuse me. And what shooting is shooting across the end grain. You're taking plane such as this. This is a number 62, what they call low angle jack plane. And when you shoot across the end grain of a board, you try to use a plane that has as low angle as possible to do that. So that's what this one is. Now I have a higher blade in it. And I believe I will change it out. Now what I mean by blades, I've got one set up for standard work. It's at a standard angle. That way I can use this plane for a standard jack plane. And then I've got another one here that is for a lower angle. Again, for cutting across the grain, which is actually the iron that came with it. So that's why we've got 2 different bevels there on that. So I might need to strop that a little bit before I put it in there. Stropping is taking a bit of leather that's mounted on a hard stick or board or paddle, and taking your cutting edges, whether they be knives, chisels, or plain blades, and bringing them across there. I don't know if you remember in the old movies, or if you had an old barber that shaved with a straight razor. And usually the hung right beside the barber's chair was looked like a big long belt, about yay wide and about yay long. and he would take his straight razor and he would go up and down, and that's called a strop. And that takes the metal, and if the metal's been through cutting, is rolled over in any way, shape, or form. When you bring that back and forth across the strop, it straightens out those metal fibers and makes it feel and look sharp again. And so extends the life of the edge that's on there, so you don't have to take it immediately to a honing stone and re-hone it. So how you do that, I think, like I said before, see if you can see this or not. I'll hold it in this hand and go back down through here like this. Now this is full grain leather with green buffing compound in it. Some people call it jeweler's rouge, but the green seems to work better. The red works too, but it's extremely fine. And so, but it'll bring it back up to a nice luster. The bevel itself, bring right up to it. Bring it down through there. One of these days I'll make a nice long paddle with a strop on it. But for today, we've got this. And careful when you're working the edges, because that there will peel your skin back about to the bone if you sharpen it correctly. This is a bevel up plane. So the iron gets dropped in there with the bevel up on this one. Gets dropped in over the nut, and then the lever cap gets put on it. One thing nice about this plane that a lot of other planes don't have is this has an adjustable mouth. I can loosen that front knob up and then move the toe in and out. What that does is tightens the mouth up. There or there. Now, a little note about the jig too. This is I got notified about the light, so this is called a shooting board, and all this is a stop up here for the wood, a hook down here to hook up against the bench, put it right up there against the edge of the bench, or drop the edge of it in your vise, which is handy. It's nice, kind of helps lock it in a little bit, and your plane rides in that track, and this will be 90 degrees to this, and this is what cleans up your saw cuts and stuff on the ends of boards. When you use your hand saw, the end of that is often pretty rough, and as you can see there off the big hand saw how rough that is. Well, you could use this plane or the other jack plane to run that along there. It cleans this up, but then hopefully will make it 90 degrees to the edge it's up against this fence. So all we're doing is just cleaning that up a little bit. That's a pretty big board for that jig, isn't it? So we'll see how this goes. I don't know if you could see that or not. You could see that right there where it has squared it up, and also it's slick across the grain. It's a good indication that's all getting planed. Always take your square, and the edge you have up against this fence right here is what you gauge your squareness from. So put it up against that and put it right up there. Yeah, see? It ain't half bad. I'd probably say it's within acceptable tolerances. And yeah, I am a little out of wind. This is, it's work, it's exercise. A lot of people pay a lot of money to go to a gym.
Just get in the woodworking.
Just get into traditional woodworking, and you'll spend your fortune in tools, but not only will you be somewhat fit, but you'll have furniture for the house or to sell. I am going to mark this as an edge that I have worked, and I just mainly put an X on the end of it. Okay, we're going to mark the dovetail that we marked on the top onto our legs. We're using the same gauge setting, and we're going to mark the line that the shoulder for the dovetail part, sliding dovetail, down along the top of the leg that we just shot on the shooting board. So bring it up there, make sure it's riding against that fence. We'll go ahead and we'll mark it around the end lightly. Bring it down the other side. And then across the other end. And those lines should come back out to touch one another. So that one is, drop this into the vise to hold it. Bring it up here in the light so I can see it, so that light isn't shining in the camera. We get our marking knife and our gauge. Now we need to mark from the corner really isn't going to be much taken off. Now, I don't know if you can see right there, there's your baseline runs across there, and then this little bit gets taken away and that little bit gets taken away into a shape of a dovetail, and that is taken away all the way across there on both sides from one end to the other. So next time we'll start working on that. Since these are laid out, I think we'll try to call it quits for now, and then we'll pick us up again at another time. So good night.